food insecurity is one of the most critical challenges we face in this century, especially in the face of a warming climate with increasing severity and frequency of extreme weather events. And we're only getting further and further away from the Sustainable Development Goal of zero hunger. And so innovation is needed in developing robust and scalable measures to be able to monitor our agricultural lands across the globe. And that's the context in which NASA Harvest was started. So for those of you who are not familiar with NASA Harvest, it's NASA's Global Food Security and Agricultural Program.
A lot of people, they think NASA and they think satellites, they think astronauts. But in fact, agriculture has really been at the core application for satellites all the way from the beginning in the early 70s when the first satellites were launched. So we can essentially see every field or almost every field across the world. And what they do is they provide us a lot of information around crop health, for example. So they might be able to show a farmer that he's got an issue in a part of his field matter. If a farmer can detect that early through a satellite, for example, they can address just that issue before that spreads to their entire farm. And part of that capability is enabling us to much better monitor smallholder systems. I think probably we all recognize smallholders produce a tremendous amount of our food. They're a critical part of food security. Produce, I think, close to a third of the food in the world, but they also have the most complex agricultural system.
Please join our next seminar in the Catalyst of Change series.
Welcome to the Catalyst of Change Women Leaders in Science seminar series. We invite you to follow us in LinkedIn, YouTube, and social media using the hashtag Women in Science for the Catalyst of Change Women Leaders in Science seminar series. We would like you to remind that this seminar is available in English, Spanish, French, and Hindi. We invite you to submit your questions and comments on Slido to be addressed in the Q&A session right after the presentation and conversation with our distinguished speaker of today. We are hearing today from an innovator in remote sensing scientist and pioneer leader, Inbal Becker-Reshef, founding director of NASA Harvest and research professor in the University of Maryland and in the University of Strasbourg. Inbal Becker-Reshef will have a conversation with Masvita Shidua, cropping system agronomist based at CIMMYT, Malawi, who works with the smallholder farmers in maize-based and mixed farming systems under pressure to improve system resilience. Now, I would like to welcome Brian Gobarts, Director General of CIMMYT, to officially open the event and introduce our distinguished speaker, Inbal Becker-Reshef. Dr. Gobarts, over to you.
Thank you, everybody, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. As you know, CIMMYT started a Catalyst of Change series that really marriage brings together the TED Talk, where each of the Catalyst of Change women generate, explain, tell us about their journey. And that is followed by a fireside chat style conversation to really, let's say, mirror or confront those experiences with one of our own champions, our own Catalyst of Change, one of our CIMMYT scientists or CIMMYT leaders. We have started this series because it is important for us to include more and better inclusion within the organization. And you can't be what you can't see, which is why we wanted different styles of leadership to be brought to the forefront. Catalyst of Change can be leaders in their community, in their family, in their own business, in their university, or in their organization, or globally or regionally. And today we have a through Catalyst of Change. Inbal Becker-Reshef, and I hope I pronounced this correctly, is somebody I've had the pleasure to work with in catalyzing new ways of doing science, new ways of bringing data and information to multiple users, from the satellite up there to the decision in the field, so she can take the decision as a farmer on how to better manage the land. So I'm sure you will enjoy this journey presented by you, by a through leader, by a through Catalyst of Change. Over to you, Inbal.
Great, thank you very much. What a tremendous honor to be here and to be able to share some of my story with you. And thank you very much for that introduction, for that videos or some things in there I've never even seen before that I've said. And so I'll start to share my screen. And I'll start by saying that I love giving presentations. I love sharing about the work that we do. I feel very comfortable doing that. I think that this request to speak is a huge honor and somewhat of a personal challenge for me. I think I do much less well speaking about more a personal perspective about my journey, my challenges. I think it's very easy to look at people and see where they are and feel like they've had a very easy or smooth journey. And I think it's much harder to share kind of the challenges and the growth of that kind of a journey. So bear with me too, as I try to share at least some of what I thought might be interesting for you all to hear. So start by just a bit of introduction. In terms of professionally, I'm the director of NASA Harvest, and I'll talk just a little bit about that, although the introduction did include that. I'm a research professor at University of Maryland and a professor at University of Strasbourg and a program scientist for GEOGLAM. I'm very importantly also a mom. I have 3 wonderful children. I'm a sister. I'm one of 5 kids as well, and a partner and many other things, as we all are. And I think we all, in terms of who we are, ultimately are a combination of the various roles and pieces that we play in as we adapt through our life. So I thought I would start by something that I feel really comfortable doing, is talking about a little bit my work and my passion, really, and then I'll go into my journey. And so, as was introduced, NASA Harvest is NASA's global food security and agriculture program, and our ultimate mission is to help advance the adoption of satellite data, both on the public side, on the private side, to ultimately help benefit food security, sustainability, and agriculture across the globe. For those of you familiar with the GEOGLAM program, we are NASA's contribution to it. And we're very much, at least initially, we're an experiment for NASA in terms of how we're set up. We have really a lot of partners across the globe. We're run as a consortium, and we're very user stakeholder driven. So we strongly believe in co-development for making an impact. And most of our activities and projects will start with our partners in driving what we develop together. We have a lot of different impact areas. A lot of them overlap CIMMYT. Of course, CIMMYT is a partner, and I've had the honor and privilege to work with various CIMMYT researchers to visit Mexico, although it's been many years since I was last there. But we have a lot of different areas that we work on that are listed here. And maybe I'll just share, I think, 2 or 3 slides on just to give a bit more of a concrete example. We work a lot on developing fundamental data, or what we call foundational data sets for agriculture, that satellite data can help us to develop, but recognizing that these are all just building blocks or pieces of a puzzle, and we start to put them together, we can start to answer impactful questions, especially when we're working regionally and locally and adapting these to local contexts. And so I'll give you just some 2 examples. One was during the 5 consecutive drought seasons, for example, across Somalia. We used planet data, around 5-meter resolution data, to map all the water bodies and look at where and how they dried out through time or didn't dry out, and looking at the timing for those, as you can see here, which was a request that we had from USAID. And another one that we're working a lot on, for example, is with the government of Ukraine, with the Minister of Agriculture there, on looking at the impact of the ongoing war. Here I'm showing an example, for example, of mapping all the abandoned croplands along the front line, and we've been able to estimate that that has translated to a quantity of grains that was never cultivated and harvested in 2023 alone that could have fed over 25 million people for a year. And so we see a lot of, what we try to do is bring value, and where satellite data can provide information to really help address various decisions in food security and agriculture. And we've been strongly advocating, this is, as of last week, we're producing estimates of the crop production coming out of Ukraine. Ukraine, of course, being a very important breadbasket in the world, both for wheat, for sunflower, for corn. And I think one of the things we've been trying to do is also set the story a bit straight, in that the production coming out of Ukraine has not significantly decreased due to the war, at least up until probably 2024. But what has happened is a significant portion of Ukraine's agriculture has been under occupation, and therefore Ukraine is not benefiting from that, yet that grain is not being reported really anywhere. So I'm happy to talk more about that. I'm very passionate about this. But I know this is not the real topic. And so I'll end on my work side saying one of the things we're really seeing now is this demand for using satellite data. And we're trying to set up a new center for rapid agricultural assessments as we see more events from extreme weather due to climate change, armed conflicts and war, and also decreasing transparency in markets. Okay, but how did I get here? I certainly never imagined that this would be the job. In fact, I don't think I knew satellites existed, and certainly if they did, not for applications of food security in agriculture. I think I first thought I would be a dancer or a gymnast, spent a lot of time painting and in art, although I always loved science, I always loved math and being outdoors, and I think was very motivated by trying to ultimately do something that I thought was going to have an impact. I grew up across 3 continents. I grew up moving about every 1 or 2 years of my life. It meant that I was always kind of the new kid in school, always a little bit uncomfortable, extremely shy, but also learned a lot from that and kind of realized there was no one way to live. There was no one kind of way that made the most sense, and that there was so much diversity in the world and so much to learn from that, and a lot that we could do to help and to change and to shape our future. And so that was a driving force for me. I think I moved ultimately from Kenya to the US in the middle of high school, probably the worst time that a teenager can move anywhere. And that was probably the biggest culture shock I had, and was very difficult for me. And I ended up finishing high school as soon as I can and going to university. And so I started quite early, didn't really know what I wanted to study. And I took a lot of different kinds of classes, and ultimately was most attracted by environmental sciences and soil sciences, and also art. And I had a real passion. What I really wanted to do was go back to Kenya, in fact. And so I'll take you through a little bit of my kind of, what you would maybe find on my CV or in a resume, and what looks like a logical transition and kind of a smooth path. So I decided ultimately to study soil science and geographical sciences. I minored in art, and then had an opportunity to work on a project that was mapping land degradation in Zimbabwe and in Haiti, and was promised kind of if I got onto this project, there would be travel. And I thought, well, this will at least get me closer to where I wanted to go. And maybe on the next slide, I'll talk about some of the challenges here, or I'll talk about them now. I think there were, doing that work, I never got to travel anywhere. I was probably the most junior person in the group, and quickly realized that if you had a PhD or were a PhD student, like that counted more. I did a lot of work that ultimately I was very passionate, believed in, but I think I faced certain challenges that ultimately I did finish my master's, but I decided this was it. I'm done with my academic career. I'm going to go and be a painter. And I did that for about 1.5 years, was had no money, realized that I was ultimately painting things that I knew people would buy, but I didn't feel like I was continuing to develop, and I felt really lost. I still had this passion for what I'd done. I think I just started to scrape the surface and understand the potential that satellite data could provide, and what we could see without being somewhere, but having an understanding of the local context. And ultimately there was an opportunity, and at the time, Matt Hansen and Chris Justice brought me back to the geography department at Maryland and integrated me into a project that was starting between NASA and the US Department of Agriculture, where the idea was to develop a system for the Foreign Agricultural Service at USDA to help them basically not have to be remote sensing scientists, but develop a system where they could inquiry, they could analyze data, zoom in and out to wherever region in the world they were responsible for monitoring agricultural conditions and ultimately forecasting production, and develop the remote sensing back end of that. And that, I think, really started to shape where I was going to go. I had a tremendous amount of support. I was young. I still was very much learning what I could and couldn't do and being able to trust myself. And I think I had the opportunity and the really great fortune to work with people that really believed in me a lot more than I did, and really put me forward and put me in situations that I felt almost uncomfortable, and being able to go and sit on panels and make decisions about how this process was going to work, what we were going to do. But that forced me to grow a lot, and also gave me confidence, and I started to really feel the value of what we could do. And in that process, we realized that it wasn't just in the US that we were trying to figure out how does USDA or other ministries of agriculture usually start to look at what were common challenges and what could we do together and learn from each other. And this ultimately turned into the GEOGLAM initiative. It's a G20 initiative that really is the international umbrella for agricultural remote sensing, for bringing that community together. At the same time, I ultimately, even though I swore I would never do a PhD, I was already working. I was doing a lot of the work. And I started to connect with one of the crop analysts for USDA, and went on crop travel with him many times across Ukraine and Russia, collected a lot of data. I would make my own maps and then go and validate and talk to farmers, talk to different people in the field. And he was starting to actually use my models in his own forecasting, and I think was a real critical mentor for me in understanding how important it was to connect the satellite data to the ground observations, to give meaning to what I was doing. But there were also challenges in that too, and I have kind of a funny slide, I think, at some point down the road. But in traveling, I think between Russia and Ukraine, had a lot of experiences of all of a sudden being followed, and especially in Russia, and people would go into our room and move things around, and that terrified me, and I thought, I'm never doing this again. But I learned a lot from those experiences as well. And eventually, I finished my PhD. And within the GEOGLAM community, started something called the Crop Monitor. And that was essentially, the idea was to bring together the various ministries of agriculture under the G20 to provide assessments of crop conditions in a way that would bring a consensus across all these different organizations. And it was a request by the economics and policy community, which was a very different community than what we were used to working with. I was young. I was often the only woman in the room, and figured out pretty quickly that there were a lot of people that weren't quite sure this was a good idea, or how we should do it, or if I should be the one trying to kind of spearhead this. And I certainly had a lot of moments developing that, and in particular, kind of one of the lowest points probably in my career, where I was, essentially in complete tears, and decided that this was enough for me. I wasn't going to do it. And again, I can share more of those kinds of challenges, but just to say, I think we all in our careers have these points where you question yourself, you question, why am I doing this? Should I be doing this? And I think what's important is always to go back and think about, well, why am I doing this? Do I believe in this? And maybe sometimes when you have a lot of resistance, it's also actually a sign that perhaps you are doing something that matters. And kind of going back to who you are and why you're doing it, and being able to kind of learn from that, maybe grow a bit of a thicker skin and continue on. And I think this is still an operational system. I think everybody's behind it now. A lot of countries see the value of this, and in fact participate in this every month. And we've got several different crop monitors ongoing at the moment. And then ultimately started Harvest, and this again was an opportunity. It was a shared vision that NASA realized they didn't have in their applied sciences and in agriculture specific applications program. And they did something very creative, which was to compete it. And the idea was, could we do something that would be a creative kind of a program for NASA that would be run outside of NASA? So my home base is University of Maryland, yet it would enable us to partner with countries, with governments, with UN organizations, with private sector. And this was a real opportunity for us to really develop a vision of how can we do this? How can we do this in a creative way? So I've gone through some of these and kind of saying, okay, well, this is my path. But I think it's, I would be willing to bet that for any person that you kind of look at where they are, their path was not easy and smooth as kind of one's CV might look, or if you just look at kind of the fact that along their career and where they went. these are almost more notes from myself than to remind me and talk about kind of some of the things. I think I met, like many of us do, a lot of personality challenges. You might work with somebody absolutely brilliant, but if they're very, very difficult to work with, then, you know, today I'm in a position, oftentimes at least, I can choose who I'm going to work with. And I would encourage you to kind of think about that too, in terms of how do you build yourself a supportive environment to the extent that you can. And obviously sometimes you can't. And I think trying to find positive ways in which you can resolve those kinds of challenges. I think another turning point for me was I had the opportunity to be a PI still when I was doing my PhD, and it really scared me. I thought, I'm not up for this. And again, I had the support to push me forward and say, no, you can do this. You lead this project. And I think that opened a lot of doors for me and also kind of pushed me to realize I can do a lot of these things. And so I think thinking about surrounding yourself with people that believe in you, can see your vision, and can support you when you have doubt, and is a secure place is really important. I think the crop monitor was a tremendous lift to get going. And I think today has proven to be a really good initiative that's really a global and a community initiative. And I think part of the challenges there too, in terms of the GEOGLAM community putting this together, was this want to perfect it and optimize what it was going to look like before we ever released it. And I think a really big lesson for me was just do it, right? And put it out there and know it's not going to be perfect, but know that way you'll iterate and you'll be able to learn and improve whatever it is that you're trying to do in a much faster way than trying to theoretically figure out what that project might look like. I think kind of touching on a career also as a woman, right? Your early and mid-career is also the time in which, if you want to have children, that's the time to do it. And it's of course a very big challenge because you feel like you're pushing, you need to develop, you need to travel a lot, you need to how do you balance that? And then I've got a partner that also has an academic career. And so faced a lot of challenges. I certainly won't say I've figured it out, but I've learned a lot. I think I was traveling a tremendous amount before, and in fact, when I was pregnant, and I owe, I think, probably my life to colleagues at IASA, because I ended up with thrombosis in both my legs during a visit there, and ended up in the hospital. And that was a real wake-up call for me, to look at what I was doing and at what cost was it coming to me, and did I really need to be doing so much, or were there other ways to do it? And I think I'm happy to share some of my mistakes too. I based at University of Maryland again, and when I did have my first child, the maternity leave was you could take 6 weeks, but you would first have to take whatever leave you had accumulated, and then you could take sick leave. And so essentially you're filling out a form saying you're sick when you're having maternity leave, which sounds completely insane, and it is. And I hope that has changed or is changing. And I was even dumber because I felt like, well, whatever it was that I was working on was really critical. And so I didn't even take the 6 weeks that I could. And, nobody's ever going to give you that time back. And those are critical moments with your children and in connecting and so I think if I have some regrets, that's certainly one of them. I have to admit, I did that with all 3 of my kids. So I didn't learn quickly. During my second child is when our proposal for the NASA harvest was due, and so I was actually working still from the hospital. And so I certainly will say I have not figured out, and I would love to learn from others. But I'm getting better, and I'm getting better at understanding how do I balance my work, my family, my children, our 2 careers, and we've had to be really creative. And I've had to ask also kind of my environment to be creative and to kind of believe in my vision of how to make this work. And I think sometimes that feels really scary, but you've got to believe in that and kind of show that you can work. And even, I think, as you heard, I'm based in Strasbourg. That's largely because my husband is a professor here. And I had this agreement with Maryland and with NASA to see how this would work out. And initially, and today, we have found that it's actually to an advantage because we have a group in Europe, one in the US. A lot of us are distributed across the world, and it means we can actually have a better reach. So sometimes you've just got to be creative and a bit brave to propose it. I think other things that were really critical for me, especially, you know, and still now I still have a 3-year-old, is I was able to take my family with me, especially when my kids were small, especially when I had 1 and 2, to conferences or to travel or to wherever I was going, and I would leave and go nurse and then come back, and I had family or people that could come with me. And I think one of the things that we were able to get the Department at University of Maryland to do, and this I have to say, give a lot of credit to Chris Justice, who was chair at the time, was to get a fund for women to be able to apply for and have at least some financial support to be able to travel with you, so that you can do at least the critical pieces that you felt were really important to do. And that was really, really important for me. And I strongly believe we need to think about how we adapt our work environments to be more creative and more supportive of the caretaker, whether it's the whoever it is in the family that is that. And so I think a lot of it is, you know, if it doesn't exist, make it up. So don't always just try to look for an example or look at what exists within your own organization, and sometimes try to see, how, you know, if you can push the boundary or how can you creatively make things work. Won't go through all of these. I think, you know, one other challenge is as you grow in your career, you start to have a team and a bigger team, and it grows. Yet most of us, at least, don't have any training in management, in leadership, right? Like, I'm a trained scientist. And so I think that's often always a challenge in figuring out, well, how do I do this? And I think from my perspective, and again, I think it's always evolving, is really looking at how do you give everybody a voice? How do we really feel like a team with a shared vision, being open to suggestions, to criticism when it's, you know, and asking for it in a constructive way, of course. But I think we're always on a journey and learning. I just quickly thought I'd show this on the bottom is Catherine Nicolamba, Alyssa Whitcraft, and I. This was one of the meetings that all 3 of us came with support from our family and with our kids, so that we could all travel, and was really important for us also to be able to support each other and see we were all doing it. And the picture on top is the first time I think I saw a flowering rapeseed. This was on crop travel in Russia, and very quickly realized that there was somebody down the road taking pictures of me. And actually we were followed this entire time. And that really freaked me out, but also made me think a lot about the kind of work we do and what we can do. And I think I still am very passionate about monitoring this part of the world and recognizing how important it is. And then that last picture is me being hospitalized in Vienna, still smiling, and really owe it to my colleagues for getting through that time. I don't know how I am on time. I think I've shared most of these, but I think it's really kind of, first of all, just believe in yourself, even when you have doubt, and in your way. And I don't know that it's always helpful to compare yourself to other people's career paths, and kind of, it's more important to look at yourself and where you want to go, and how you can move forward in the way you want, and find a way to build a support system, whether it's work, it's outside, it's friends, it's I think being clear about how you can balance and learning to say no. I mean, that's still a challenge that I struggle with, but I'm getting better. I think working in a team, I mean, it's always a team effort, right? Like, you might get recognition or but I think overall we do it together, and we do so much better when we do together, and making sure you appreciate everybody around you, everyone that you're working with, and that you don't just feel it, but you actually can voice that, I think goes a long way. And making sure you're really able to give a voice to everyone, or ask for your voice to be heard, right? I think I've talked about, like, flexible work policies and an inclusive culture and diversity. I mean, I think it's important in terms of where our backgrounds are, where we're from, also our interdisciplinary work and our expertise. And in all ways, really, this is just, like, absolutely critical for innovation, for success, for whatever it is that we're doing. I think important also is to think about how you can be a role model for others, in a way of thinking about how you want to be supported, how you want to be treated, how you think you believe is really helpful, and being able to really empower other people. I benefited so much from people empowering me and believing in me, and being able to then, you know, do that and continuously strive to do that. I think a lesson I'm still trying to figure out is how to really disconnect and take a holiday. And when you take a holiday, just really take it, or, you know, take your maternity leave, or whatever it is, right? And have kind of your life outside of work. And I think ultimately finding what you're really passionate about in your work so that it doesn't feel like work, and that you're happy to go to work every day is, I think, really, really critical. So just like to recognize this is by no means comprehensive. I think, when I think about who my role models were, I ultimately kind of construct them from different people in my life and in vision, but also like really thankful to a lot of the mentors that I still have today that have really been critical for the decisions I've made. I want to say that like NASA Harvest is very much women-led. We have amazing women in different leadership positions across NASA Harvest, with a lot of support, but just I feel so incredibly lucky to work with the people that I do work with and to share our challenges and to learn from each other. And of course, my family and a lot of the support that I've had. And so I hope I stuck to time. I didn't actually look, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Inbal, for your very inspiring presentation. Thanks for sharing, your amazing achievements as well as the mistakes that you've made. I think that's also very useful. All the bold steps as well that you took to propose new things. That's, it's important to see, and to get inspired by how you can actually make changes from just thinking, hey, let me give this a go, and it can actually work out. So for everyone else, my name is Majita Chidua. I'm an associate scientist, a cropping systems agronomist at CIMMYT, and I'm based in Malawi. I'm a member of the Women in Crop Science group, and we're interested in highlighting women leaders in science to increase the number of role models that young women have. I wanted to interview you, Inbal, today because you're at the cutting edge of a discipline that is increasing in relevance and demand for food security applications, which is something that's really close to my heart. I think, as you know, we've recently suffered a severe El Nino in Southern Africa, and that has put food security, which is what I work for, in jeopardy for several countries. And I know that with Earth observation technologies, we could harmonize monitoring and monitoring agriculture production, and in that way improve how governments and how different organizations can respond. And I know also you have accumulated lots of awards for your work in a male-dominated field. So that's really, truly inspiring. And I'm really honored to have this opportunity to talk with you today. And I want to start by asking you a question, which is quite still on the technical side. Can you tell us more about how Earth observation technologies can contribute to early warning and disaster risk reduction? And how close are we to having these technologies work for us without needing boots on the ground? I don't know if this is maybe an ambition or it's actually not an ambition, but yes, if you could tell us more about that, please.
Yeah, of course. Sure. I mean, I think, Earth observations are, if you think about it, there's satellites that are going around the Earth all the time, collecting information on a daily basis across the world, in a lot of different wavelengths, right? So they're looking both in terms of how our eyes see the world in RGB, red, blue, green, but also in a lot of other wavelengths that can be sensitive to water content, that can be sensitive to the composition of the atmosphere, that can be sensitive to dry conditions, to vegetation structure, right? And so we can use, and importantly, we have them over long periods of time, right? And so oftentimes, for example, you're trying to look at what has been the impact this year. It is, first of all, knowing, well, where should I look, right? So where are the croplands, and satellite data can help us to map those. I will say it's always really critical to have information from the ground, to have domain expertise on the particular country that you're working with and or looking at, to make sure you're not just producing a map that's garbage. But then once you can define where you're looking, you can look at, what does an average season look like, right? What did the last 5 years, the last 10 years look like versus how this current season is developing? Or what was the last El Nino year and how did, this year compare to that, right? Like you can start to look at a lot of different insights as the season is developing, before it's the end of the season to get at information that can help to trigger safety nets, social safety nets, or can help to trigger insurance, or can help to give a warning about perhaps things that you can actually do to protect your crops or change. So there's certainly a lot of early warning systems today active that are benefiting from the satellite data. We're seeing more and more demand from these at the national level within ministries of agriculture. A lot of work happening within NASA Harvest, both actually in Malawi with Christina Justice and FAO, or Catherine Nakalembe's work with different countries, right? So we are doing a lot of that on our side, but there's a huge amount of work in general. In terms of how close are we to doing this without any information on the ground, I think we'll always need information from the ground, and we'll always need experts, and we'll always need to be co-developing these systems, right? And so when I say diversity and also an expertise in teams, you want to have that structure to ultimately be able to get the full benefit that satellite data hold.
Great. Thanks for that. So it sounds like you work in a space where you need, well, you enable, I think, a lot of interdisciplinary work. So you generally work probably with big teams. And I'm wondering, you know, I think, yes, you say that NASA Harvest is very much women-led, but I suppose when you're working with other colleagues from different disciplines, different organizations, I want to imagine that, and you did say sometimes there were lots of times where you showed up as the only woman who's there. I'm wondering, have you worked in environments where you kind of show up and people see you as a woman before they see you as a scientist, before they see you as a leader? And if I may put a disclaimer here, so I do celebrate being a woman. I love being a wife, a mom, a sister, and all of that. But there are times I think in a professional setting, I want to show up, I want to be seen as a scientist before I'm seen as a woman. Have you come across this? Has this been a challenge for you? And how have you sort of dealt with that?
So yes, I would say certainly more so earlier in my career. There were many times when I was the only woman in the room, that I was half the age of most the people that were around me. And that probably before I kind of had my reputation or like recognition and so I was seen as the young person, the inexperienced person, the woman, whatever, right? And that was a challenge for sure. But I also had people in the room that were really supportive of me and kind of empowered me to keep forward. And I was going to say what I was going to say, and try as much as I could to not tolerate the other. And I think that is generally going to be the minority, right? But it takes one person to kind of destroy a feeling, or can bring you down. But I think again, I think it's changing. I have seen in my own career, and even in the environment that I'm in, that's certainly changing. Is there more of that still? Yes, but I think there's more and more recognition that can't happen. And so I think you've got to continue to be who you are and what you are and make your voice heard. I mean, I think I've shared with you in the past that I used to feel like I looked too young, and I would put makeup on just to try to feel like I needed to be taken more seriously, which today I look back and I think it's totally ridiculous. So yeah, I've definitely experienced those moments.
Yeah, that's it's really tough. I mean, hearing that you actually go out there and do something that's not really you, just so that people can accept who you want to be. It's kind of crazy like that. But I guess it's really important, and I love that you're saying this. It's really important for the young women out there to remember that, yes, this may happen in your younger years. People may not recognize and may not want to listen, but to just sort of keep on pushing. And I'm wondering if there's anything specific or particular in the way that you were brought up, or the way that you grew up, that you think helped you to have that really resilient spirit that says, I'm going to try, I'm going to, put my voice in there. I will still try, even if somebody's trying to silence me. Is there something about the way that you were brought up, or is there maybe a role model who came, sort of a role model who you've looked up to, who has made it so much more possible for you to achieve so much and to lead?
Good questions. Again, one thing I'll say on the other one, just to kind of close the loop on what do you do in those situations, I think is you call it what it is in, you know, in a polite way, but I think you put that person on the spot. And I think that, you know, and to start it up. In terms of how I grew up, I think I certainly saw my parents working really, really hard. I would say they're both extremely resilient people. They're both had very challenging kind of pasts and immigrants in different ways. And I saw them be extremely creative and resilient in how they were. And so I think that for sure influenced a lot of how I kind of just was determined to like push on, although I don't know that I would even define myself as resilient relative to other people. So I think it's going back to your core, right? And like who you are, why you're doing this, and finding the people that will kind of support or believe in you. And I think it was also like just traveling a lot and seeing a lot of different ways of being and living and believing in a lot of possibility.
I think you certainly are, I mean, very resilient, and I mean, certainly pushing. The idea of not taking maternity leave, oh my gosh. But of course, you say, if you were to do it now, you would do it differently. I guess I would like to ask then, is there, along the way, I'm sure you've learned a lot more about work-life balance. So what do you do differently now? I'm amazed that you've got 24 hours in a day as well, you know, because you're achieving so much, you're working on so many things. And how do you do it? Have you now figured out like work-life balance? How do you do it? Do you have advice for younger women or junior women who are still, you know, who are at, also striving to achieve a lot? So how do you strike the balance?
Gosh, I mean, I think that's something I still struggle with. I am much better at that and kind of drawing the line and saying, okay, this is now my kids' time or my time. I think my time is probably the one I'm most easily willing to give up, but you pay a price for that later. Or in your friendships or in your, you know, your own personal private relationships. You know, there are times where I think, oh my God, well, you know, you worked more hours, or, you know, so it's like going back and being like, wait a minute, that's all crazy. And are you really being productive the more you work, or at some point you're actually a lot more productive when you've taken a break and you're fresh and you're creative. I think I found that sometimes just changing scenery, going, you know, instead of like being at the computer and not feeling like I'm progressing in whatever it is, like going outside and having a walk or having a walking meeting or, but I think it's kind of prioritizing, right? And thinking about, okay, maybe not being, you know, what is it that's good enough, right? That like you've done what you needed to do. It's not perfect. It's not what the best you know you can do, but it's good enough. And that's going to mean that I can do other things with the time that you have. So it's not a great answer because I feel like I still struggle with figuring it out, but I've also felt the price of, you know, losing friendships or losing contacts with people or not having enough time with my family. And in fact, I've recently started to work with like a coach, with somebody who can help me vocalize like, what are my priorities and how does that relate to how I'm actually living my life? And oftentimes they don't quite align, right? And so being like really honest with yourself about that.
But it's a work in progress.
Definite work in progress, yes. But I'm getting better at saying no. And I think delegating, right? Like I think that's, you know, surrounded by wonderful, capable people. And so that's
one of the things as well that you said in your talk was something that sounded a little bit like just do it, like do things rather than perfect them. I think that's something for me that I also want to take forward, it sounds like something that's really great in, sort of cutting back on that to-do list that can kind of really go crazy if you don't watch it. So you also said you want to give more people a voice. You want to be more deliberate and inclusive and all of that. Well, that's what I took from it. And I'm wondering, so do you have now in your teams younger women that you mentor in a formal mentorship, or how do you do this? Are you helping some women also excel and, grow in their careers?
Yeah, I mean, I think we help each other, right? And so I think whether it's somebody that formally I'm mentoring, I feel like I'm always learning from them, right? It's like always, I feel like it's a two-way street, and I can share what I know. I can try to meet the needs that they have. I can share my experience, but I always learn so much more, I feel like, back from the team. I think it's really important to let everybody be heard. Everybody has got, whether they're, an undergraduate or just starting, or whether they're a senior, professor or where have you, right? Like everybody has a really valuable perspective. And I think making sure that everybody feels confident and comfortable to share where they are, we all benefit and learn from that. So I certainly have, and across Harvest, we have many talented, wonderful women and from different places in the world, and that I think it's deliberate across all of the Harvest team, I would say, to promote that and to be for as much as we can share and give and really build it.
Yeah. So you've got peers that you sort of bounce ideas off and talk with about mentorship, sort of peer mentoring, and you've got younger women as well that you're helping to bring up. Sounds really great.
I think part of that is doing kind of, just putting responsibilities on people that they might feel like they're not ready for, but that they are, right? And I think that's something really
the support.
Yeah. Saying, here, now you're going to go do whatever it is. You're going to lead this project, or you're going to go do this talk, or, whatever that opportunity is. I think people grow a lot. They're scared from it sometimes, but I feel like that's how you jump and you empower people.
Mm-hmm. Are there men in your life that you also really feel have been very important? And I mean, do you have a message as well, like for the men in our lives at work, at home, friends and things like this, how they can help women achieve more? Do you have sort of examples from your life and some words maybe for some men who may be listening as well to how they can help other women achieve?
For sure, many. I mean, I think if I look at kind of my advisor and kind of mentor, he really 100% was behind me and believed in me and put me forward, and kind of when the moments were that I needed somebody to back me vocally in odd and different situations, he certainly did. I think he was very supportive and understanding of, you didn't everything have to be 9 to 5, you're in the office and this is how it's going to work, right? So he was very supportive of this idea of being able to travel with my children, and in fact, like helping make that a policy across the department. So I think certainly, and there have been several of them, and then my partner has certainly been a massive support as well, and kind of being able to promote what I'm doing, being able to support me, to enable me to stay with the children when I travel or when I'm working late, or, and so it's not without its challenges, don't get me wrong, and I'm making it sound all rosy and perfect. It's not, but I would certainly say men and women have really important roles, and advisors and mentors and family, and, and I have my in-laws and, who would always travel, so there are a lot of those examples. And I would certainly say, there's a role, a really important role to play in oftentimes being able to make the change that are needed for women to succeed, because it's a tricky time for women to be both successful, to manage 2 careers when they're in relationships, and also to have children I think we just need to talk about that and recognize the challenges that come with that and be creative.
And it's not fair, right, for women to have to choose. So
Right.
yeah, we need everybody to sort of rally together on this. Finally, I want to know, what is the best thing about your job? What do you love most about your job, or about your setup, job, home, everything, life?
Gosh, there's so many things about it that I love. I think the creativeness that we have to think about how we think we can make the best impact, right? And I think we see so many opportunities, and we're able to pursue them in different ways, and work with just amazing people. I think both the team internally to Harvest, the partnerships that we have built, that kind of, we really feel like we're co-creating. And I think this way of seeing things in partnerships, and then also just seeing this massive potential kind of being realized, and all of a sudden so much more demand for these kinds of applications and information, and being able to take them for really making a difference and making a change in policies to kind of everyday decisions of, from farmer all the way through to policymakers. So I absolutely love the people that I work with. So I think I feel extremely fortunate.
Really great. Thank you so much, Inbal. I think Isabel will take over and ask probably a few more questions from Slido. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Masvita. I was so excited that it would be you that I would be having this conversation with, and talking about amazing women. I know we haven't met a lot, but I find you also to be an extremely inspiring, and just was very excited to have this opportunity to talk with you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. You're so gracious. Thank you.
Thank you, Masvita, for having this very rich conversation with Inbal Becker-Reshef. Now we would like to open the floor for questions from the audience. We invite you to raise your hand, to turn on your camera, and unmute yourself if you would like to ask a question or comment, or you can submit it via Slido. We have the Slido code on the screen. And we have received several questions already, so I'm going to read the first one. Compared to the other leadership models you have encountered, what are the main differences in NASA Harvest leadership, and what unique aspects does it strive to implement?
I think something that we've tried to do is be, to the extent, non-hierarchical, right? So different roles are clear, but I think we try to very much be a team, and to empower as many people as we can within the team to take initiative, to lead activities, to lead partnerships where they see opportunities for the types of work that we do. I think we have deliberately set ourselves up as very agile in terms of our structure, so that we're not very bureaucratic in terms of how we partner, in terms of our decision-making process. We do have processes in place, of course, because I think that is very important, but it's not to a point where that's debilitating from being able to move forward and to be able to make progress.
Thank you. It says, is there a support fund at NASA Harvest for professional women to cover travel, logistics, and child care? How is it implemented?
Okay, another good question. And so one of the complicating factors about NASA Harvest is that we are a consortium. And so like the core home base for NASA Harvest is University of Maryland. So within University of Maryland, we have set up a way for women to apply for somewhat symbolic funding, right? It won't necessarily always cover all of your costs to bring somebody with you, for example, when you're traveling, but it certainly is very helpful. But you might be a Harvest funded partner at a different university or institution. And so there, of course, that's governed by whatever that institution is. So I can only speak for that particular activity and policy is very much a Department of Geographical Sciences at University of Maryland.
Thank you. What advice do you have for institutes like CIMMYT for fostering talent and leadership?
I think it's a lot of what I shared, for one, being a supportive environment for listening to, I think it's often really important to ask the question of, how can I support you better? Right? And it sounds like a really simple question, but you'll get the answers that people have or want to be able to voice. And so it's really understanding what it is different people's challenges are, whether it's around childcare, whether it's around being able to take more responsibility, whether it's around having ideas and finding ways to implement them. So I in a way, I think, for one, making sure you've got like a place where people feel safe to talk and to express themselves and to be able to be heard in a constructive way, because I've also seen that done in a not so constructive way, right? And so, but really also being able to ask and have those conversations. I think it's important for women to support each other, but also in overall in a team. And I don't think it just has to be women, right? It's overall that kind of environment, and having some flexibility.
Yeah, thank you. So also you mentioned that you wanted to be a gymnast or dancer when you were young, and then you were painting. So there should be a kind of influence of arts and in your chosen career. What can you tell us about it?
I mean, one thing I noticed is for a long time, I was painting a lot of agricultural. I love color, and so I was painting a lot of vegetables and fruits and fields, and I think I still go back to that creative space. I mean, I think it's all part of me, right? And I don't have so much time to paint now. I feel like I need a lot more like mental space, but that's something that I'm hoping to go back with, to really kind of give myself and connect back to myself in some ways. But I think, I don't know, I see my kids painting a lot now, and but also fascinated by, and I actually think I draw a lot of my inspiration from their curiosity and care about the work that we do and how we do it. But I would certainly say those are all still parts of me. I think I just chose to keep them as a hobby and not feel like they were my job. Like that was what I felt was right for me.
Thank you. Thank you, Inbal, for sharing with us your professional and personal journey on science, leadership, and for your great enthusiasm, raising the importance of being creative, resilient, and make possible a working balance through priorities. So do you have any final message that you would like to share with the audience?
I mean, I think listen to yourself, really, and believe in yourself, and build yourself a supportive, you know what you need and what you want, and recognize that nothing is smooth and nothing is easy. And so know that when you are down and when you fall, you learn from that and you get back up and you keep going, and the sun will be up again tomorrow, and maybe today's not your best day, but and kind of keeping like your long view of where are you, why are you doing what you're doing, what do you really love and feel passionate about, and kind of keeping yourself as your reference first.
Thank you. Also, we like very much all those lessons that you shared with us during your professional and personal journey. On behalf of Bram Govers, Director General of CIMMYT, we thank you so much for your valuable time, for being here today, and for sharing with us all this information, all these advices, and all your personal rich experience and professional growth. Also, we thank the audience that joined today. Do not miss our following Catalyst of Change Women Leaders in Science Seminar Series. Have a nice day. Have a nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. And it's a real honor.
Thank you so much.
I'm Inga Jacobs-Mata. I'm the regional representative for the International Water Management Institute Southern Africa offices. So that's South Africa, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, and also now the new director for water growth and inclusion. So I lead an wonderfully exciting initiative called Ukama Ustawi. It's the CGIAR's regional integrated initiative for Eastern Southern Africa. And it's all about how we diversify and sustainably intensify maize-based systems through different mechanisms, but some of them being agribusiness acceleration, We have a strong focus on supporting the agribusiness ecosystem in East and Southern Africa, and then in the enhancement of digital agro-advisory services. So that's sort of enhancing the delivery of climate information services in this region. I think it reaffirms what we have been doing, you know, this emphasis on partnerships, this emphasis on really supporting local partners and local institutions. So we have, you know, under U2 a phrase, together we grow and develop. And it's sort of solutions for the region, by the region. So really I was encouraged about, you know, just the amount of partners actually that we are connected with. That was the one thing. And also this issue around scaling, that in order to reach the 300 million farmers in Africa, we have to go wide, reach as many through our scaling innovations, and make sure that we're talking about use, we're talking about technology adoption, not just access to all of these innovations as well.
Please join our next seminar in the Catalyst of Change series.